Welcome to Classes in Session, presented by UI Health. I'm Doug Glanville. Eroding mental health has been evoked by the greatest athletes of our generation as a significant barrier in their lives. They are raising awareness with honest revelations, sometimes withdrawing from top competitions. In conjunction with navigating the second year of a pandemic, we find ourselves still facing interrupted relationships and tentative access to each other as people. We will be joined by two-time Olympic gold medalist and International Gymnastics Hall of Famer Bart Conner, Chicago Tribune reporter Stacy St. Clair, and Dr. Mark Hutchinson, an orthopedist who has worked multiple international competitions for Team USA. Let's get to class. My mother often reminded me that my late father used to sum up the importance of protecting one's mental health by saying, everyone is entitled to protect their own sanity. He was a psychiatrist by trade, and after his journey from Trinidad to the United States in 1956, he practiced for decades in northern New Jersey. Within the past few years, there has been more public and open conversations about mental health, thanks to some of the world's highest performing athletes. Naomi Osaka opened up about her duty to talk to the press after a match. Kevin Love spoke about it in the context of a macho culture in the NBA. Recently, Olympian Simone Biles pulled out of major events at the Tokyo Olympics, battling the twisties and the overwhelming nature of being the face of the games. Each cited mental health, and what they shared from the top of their craft was revealing. It also required us to gain more understanding about how to even define mental health. So what is mental health? As my father would say, it's related to sanity, that peace of mind or clear thought that allows you to be in control, a sense of calm over the outcome and the process by which you produce that outcome, a recognition of the limits of your control over the future, the past, and the actions of others. But when you feel none of that peace because of the frenetic nature of competing and the environment around that competition, it can create a difficult mental cycle. According to the nonprofit Athletes for Hope, 35% of elite athletes suffer from a mental health crisis that manifests in a variety of ways. 33% of college athletes experience significant symptoms of anxiety and stress, and of those numbers, only 30% seek assistance. My father spent countless hours learning how to formally diagnose and treat a patient to become a physician. It gave him the ability to know what a person was experiencing, to make clinical recommendations, which then pointed the patient towards treatment. It gave them steps to take. Yet much of what these athletes reference reside in many areas of mental health, whether the anxiety comes from performing, from the pressure of fitting in, or from grappling with the expectation to maintain greatness year in and year out. As Biles expressed, there is a sense that one's health is always evolving, and that it must be attended to and guarded with care, because at any given moment, a lack of care can not only take you out of your game, but it can take you out of your relationships, including the one with yourself. Retired Colts quarterback Andrew Luck said this about the space he found himself in. I was a sad, miserable human. I was not nice to myself, nor was I nice to anyone else. I was a miserable SOB to be around. I was nervous. I was scared. As we consider what we can all do to improve our lives with sensitivity towards others, athletes are reaching out to us more and more to embrace how we can do it together. This can be touch and go, given the perception that playing a sport for a living equals eternal bliss. Yet it is clearly more than about happiness, but about a state of heart, a state of soul, a state of mind. And if those that love what they do are struggling, then we all should be paying close attention, for love may not be enough. Very excited to have come to class a legend, Bart Conner, United States Olympic gymnast, gold medalist in team and parallel bars in 1984, even had a move named after him, the Conner spin, who he originated. A strong advocate of Special Olympics, continuing great work in his own academy, the Bart Conner Gymnastics Academy in Norman, Oklahoma. And full disclosure, fellow commentator at ESPN and others in the Disney family. So welcome, Bart, to class.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be on with you today.
Excellent. Well, it's been a riveting time. Certainly the Olympics in Tokyo 2020, 2021, and so much has happened. But I think one of the centerpieces around your sport was Simone Biles. And Simone Biles spoke openly and freely about mental health and her challenges with a term many of us didn't know outside the gymnastics world is twisties, and sort of the anxiety and challenges she was facing. So I think many people heard it through the lenses of their experience, but you've been on the inside at this level. And what we want to understand is, what did you hear from your experience that Biles was sharing with the world?
Well, it was a powerful moment, and it certainly, especially when we're all living through the stresses and the strains of a pandemic and all trying to cope with our own balance and mental health. When, Simone, who seemed, unbeatable, all of a sudden said to the world, "Hey, I'm not okay right now." And it shocked everyone, whether they were traditional sports followers or just Olympic fans. And people didn't quite understand it. I found myself very inadequately explaining the twisties to many people, because it sounds like something a girl puts in her hair to hold her ponytail, but it's pretty serious. And I think I tried to make an analogy the other day. I said, I've had it 37 years ago. I had the twisties, and it's terrifying. I mean, even now, my palms sweat when I think about it, because if you're flipping and twisting 12 feet in the air and you have no idea where the ground is and you're going to hit something soon, it's terrifying. And you could land on the back of your neck. And people said, "Is it like the yips in golf?" And I said, "Well, a little bit, but in golf, you miss a putt. And here, you go out of the building on a stretcher." So the fact that she could, while the whole world was watching, say, "Hang on a second, I'm struggling here." When we all thought she was superhuman, all of a sudden she revealed a human side. And, not everybody reacted the same to it. Some people were critical. I understood exactly what she was going through, and I thought she did exactly the right thing to protect herself, to protect her teammates, to protect her own mental health. And of course, then she launched this enormous global conversation about stress and pressure and mental health anyway. And then for her to come full circle and finally compete on the beam on the last day and to get a bronze medal and overcome this incredible obstacle was heroic on so many levels. And I think she deserves to be celebrated, and she had the courage.
Part of what comes with Biles in being the sort of uniqueness of her ability is that the risk is that much higher, right? She's twisting 4 times. She's at a level. So I'm curious to understand the pressure and the mental health components of injury, right? And risk and pushing through it. You had a torn bicep at one point that knocked you out, and you were able to recover right before the games, lost the Olympics through boycott. And then we're able to come back in 84. But so what about the impact of injury and how mental health sort of plays into that?
This thing that people couldn't understand that Simone was going through, the pressure from the twisties was completely different, because there are unknowns. You don't know what's going to happen when you're flying through the air. Now, when I tore my bicep, and I tore it in the Olympic trials, and literally it tore from the top of the shoulder, it pulled down like a Venetian blind and rolled up like a ball in my elbow. I knew what happened, and I knew what needed to get done, and I knew I had to get surgery, and I had a challenge to come back. But everything that I was faced with was understood and well known, and there was no mystery to it. Either make it or I don't make it. But when you're dealing with issues that involve the lack of concentration or pressure that causes you to short circuit a little bit, that's way scarier, because you don't know how to fix it. And you can't just sit down with a sports psychologist and get talked out of it. You have to go back and rebuild those muscle memory skills from the foundational skills. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 weeks to work your way slowly back up to doing the higher level skills. So that's the most terrifying thing, is the unknown.
We'll be right back on Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health. More with Bart Conner after the break. He explains why chasing perfection is always a part of the conversation for the world's best athletes. Later, reporter Stacy St. Clair and Team USA Dr. Mark Hutchinson join us to dive deeper into mental health on the international stage. If you or someone you know are experiencing symptoms or simply want to check your mental wellness, please call 866-600-CARE today. That's 866-600-CARE. Welcome back to Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health. Here's more of our conversation with Bart Conner. Yeah, so Bart, where does coaching come into play in this component? Because although there is the physical line you could draw and the sort of mental aspect of maybe what Biles was sort of navigating, but you connect the dots and you have a coach that says, okay, are you hurt? Are you not hurt? Maybe you need to go further. It's sort of that pushing, and you're running an academy now and thinking through, how do I know when this athlete is at a limit where that physical really will blur into this sort of mental component?
What I see is it's a critical role of the coach in this situation to really know your athlete, to know what's going to help them work their way through this. I was really fortunate. My coach, Paul Zerd, who was my coach at the University of Oklahoma, I was already an Olympic athlete and I was already a world champion. And all of a sudden, I can't do a simple tucked back somersault on the floor. Every time I wanted to go up in the air, I looked over my shoulder and I did a full twist. And so I had to go back literally. And it's really humiliating and embarrassing because everybody else in the gym's like, wow, this guy's like, he's the best guy in the country. And he can't do a simple backflip and he can't explain why he can't do it. And the coach's role is essential. Because if the coach just says, come on, suck it up and do it, I'm sorry, that doesn't work in this situation. And some people thought that's what she should have done. No way. That's too scary and too dangerous.
Your sport also has the other side of that. It has a perfect 10. Is there something to being in a sport that actually identifies perfection in terms of your stress, the trying to maintain it or reach it?
Well, that's a great point. Yeah. And as we know, perfection is really not possible. And what happens typically is, and certainly what happened in the case of Nadia, the gymnast before her was superb and got a 9.95. And then here comes Nadia, who's like, she should be an 11. It's like, oh my God, she is rewriting the rules. She was, the Simone Biles of her time. So all of a sudden, the judges go, even Nadia acknowledges on her perfect 10 routine, which was a compulsory uneven bar routine, she landed it. If you look at the video, her feet scoot a little bit on the floor, maybe just a couple of inches. So, technically it's probably a 1/10 of a point deduction back then under those rules. But the judges were in a corner because the young lady before her got a 9.95 and they can't give the same score to Nadia because she was significantly better. So they gave her a 10. And then that set off the conversation. Was it perfect? What is perfection anyway? And is it attainable? And so I think it was very interesting sort of philosophical question around what is perfection anyway. It's just, it's a moving target. As the perfect experience in sports lasts only till the next game. You got to get up and do it again. And, the bar continues to get raised. And that's one of the things that makes sports so exciting and so compelling. So no, perfection is not possible. It was just, that was the gold standard for the moment. But guess what? Moments change and there will be a new gold standard.
Well, Bart Conner, I really appreciate you taking time to join us at class and teach us about many things that are so insightful and necessary in this time as sports are bringing us together and raising the bar conversation, especially in mental health and what we learn from this Olympics in Tokyo. So thanks so much for your time.
Doug, it's a huge honor to visit with you today. Thank you very much for inviting me.
We'll be right back on Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health. Coming up, reporter Stacy St. Clair and Team USA Dr. Mark Hutchinson join us as we continue our study of mental health. Both explain how Simone Biles opened the door for other Olympians to talk openly about their struggles. That and more after this. If you or someone you know are experiencing symptoms or simply want to check your mental wellness, please call 866-600-CARE today. That's 866-600-CARE. If you or someone you know are experiencing symptoms or simply want to check your mental wellness, please call 866-600-CARE today. That's 866-600-CARE. Very excited to be joined by our panelists today at Classes in Session. It's an honor to have Dr. Mark Hutchinson, who is currently a professor of orthopedics and sports medicine at University of Illinois at Chicago. He served many times on the Team USA medical staff through a variety of Olympics, including Tokyo. And we also have Stacy St. Clair, an award-winning journalist currently at the Chicago Tribune, who's covered a number of Olympics and has tremendous insight on the athletes as we'd like to know them. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Dr. Hutchinson, I wanted to start with you. We've been having a discussion about mental health. And in my introduction, I mentioned that my father was a psychiatrist. So growing up, it was a conversation in our house. Now, when you talk about athletes like Simone Biles raising that conversation, her status and her influence certainly made a huge difference in making this more of a household conversation like it was for me growing up. And I wanted to start at the baseline on a definition of mental health because it is so broad. And in your medical practice, how has it played a role and how do you actually define it?
Well, certainly mental health is really core to who you are as a person. It's a wholesome look at taking care of a patient. So it's not just dealing with a shoulder injury or a knee injury. It's going to be how they respond to that injury, how they're approaching the event, and then the stresses of the event. And so their optimal performance is going to be based off of a solid mental health and preparation, both mentally and physically. And so I think nowadays we're focusing on mental health, and it's really a more wholesome look at the athletes and better for them overall.
You see this a lot, I guess, in commentary, players, especially athletes, talking about trying to put themselves in a common human sphere. And one quote, I know, Stacy, you mentioned that Torrey Franklin, I believe, said was, "We're not robots." You might hear, "We bleed like everyone else." In your experience, do you find that readers receive that well, find it effective? Is it effective messaging to really try to express the commonality? Or have you found that it's not something that actually resonates? I'm just curious what your experience said.
I think before these games, it might have been a different answer. You talked about Michael Phelps earlier. He won the medals and then talked about his depression. And so I think there was an appetite for, we'll hear about your adversity as long as you overcome it with a medal. And I think maybe now Simone Biles showed us that there is strength, there is value in just being honest and speaking candidly. So I think going forward, there might be a different interest in what athletes are saying. At least I hope there is.
What's next? You mentioned what was put in place for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, but now we're looking forward and we're gaining more understanding, and there may be more athletes speaking more. What do you think the next iteration is for how we continue to serve these athletes, which in turn, especially when publicly, will ultimately serve us all?
Acceptance, I think, is probably the single term that I would say, because remember in the past, you say I have a mental health problem and you're ostracized. Now, if we can get past, yes, we're addressing this as a key concern and it's acceptable to talk about it, acceptable to seek help, that's the next path.
I know there was a lot of debate back stateside. I saw it in coverage and I saw it in social media about whether Simone did the right thing. But I don't know if Dr. Hutchinson would agree with me, but I didn't hear any of that from the USA athletes or from any athletes actually, as to whether Simone should have done what she did. Everyone I spoke to supported her 100%. Everyone I read there supported her 100%. So I think they're hoping for just a more public understanding of the issue. And you're right, it will shape how I cover it going forward. Just like, no one really pushes for athletes to play through serious physical pain. I think, journalists will stop maybe glorifying as much or expecting the whole, just gut it out or just push yourself through it, because that's probably not the healthiest track for people to be taking in all circumstances.
Yeah, and as someone in journalism, I have a great appreciation throughout my career. My story, my father was sick for 3 years of my career and ultimately passed away the last game of the season in 2002. And I remember it, 2000, 2001, just trying to figure out how am I going to perform, knowing that this is with me. And eventually it became public. And that in and of itself was hard because I didn't really have answers and I was not sure who I was answering to per se when it came to the truth I wanted to tell, right? I felt like I kind of lost the power to decide who I wanted to kind of keep in that inner circle. So I certainly appreciate that there's a renewed awareness. I think Naomi Osaka was a big part of that. She kind of said something and there was some pushback and then people said, whoa, maybe we need to understand more. So hopefully that will be true for all of us and we'll have more patience, more understanding and get more educated about it. And I certainly want to thank you both because you both have provided the insight and the education to help us have more context about what athletes are facing, what we all are facing, and your continued great work in covering the game in a human and direct and passionate way, and also treating those and being there as a guiding medical force clinically and personally, inspired by our power to come together through sport. So thank you for both your examples and your time. It's become clear that for those who compete at the highest level, mental health is not a game. Although the conversation accelerated through what Simone Biles revealed to us in the Olympics, it has been raised by a whole host of athletes over time. Athletes who compete at the pinnacle of their sport have farther to fall. In some cases, whether on a BMX bike or landing a gymnastics move named after you, the landing is inherently dangerous. Yet their figurative fall can be even more devastating, a recovery that cannot begin by just wearing a cast. How we discuss mental health, cover it in journalism, and treat it has an opportunity to evolve in this moment, in part because influential athletes have chosen to engage. And it has become clearer that athletes can set an example by taking care of themselves and sharing their challenges with mental health, just as they may share their talents in an arena. This is another way to honor their craft, a craft that uplifts, inspires, and unites at its best. And sometimes that first step is a courageous admission by the best in the world. I'm Doug Glanville. I'll see you next time.